Welcome. I'm Vice Dean of the New School for Public Engagement, one of several divisions of the New School, which includes, many people don't know this, Parsons, Mannes, and my school, the home of the Food Studies program. The New School is unlike most American institutions of higher learning. We're experimental, progressive, and we like to get our hands dirty. The New School is about shaking things up. We hope to shake things up tonight. The New School was founded in 1919 when a group of disaffected intellectuals from Columbia University, frustrated by the intellectual timidity and constraint of traditional universities, moved downtown to Greenwich Village, then as now, a place of creative and open intellectual and artistic exploration. Those intellectuals, including John Dewey and Thorstein Veblen, created a place for adult learners and scholars to come together as citizens interested in inquiry, discussion, and debate around issues of importance to society in the 20th century. They called it the New School for Social Research and aimed to ask provocative questions about society's most challenging problems and to upend traditional notions about politics, economics, civil society, and the social fabric. And now, in the 21st century, in that same spirit, we turn our attention to issues around food, food systems, and food politics. Through the New School's courses and programs in sustainable systems and food studies, faculty, students, government, business, and social leaders, and concerned citizens like yourselves, come together to challenge traditional thinking and seek workable solutions to difficult problems. You who are here in this auditorium, in our 2 overflow rooms, and participating via modern technology represent the many food movements of New York City. You are concerned with food justice, anti-hunger, sustainable food, school food, healthy food access, ethnic and cultural diversity, urban agriculture, food safety, and much more. You represent community groups and nonprofit organizations, food businesses, foundations, government agencies, academic institutions, and the Fourth Estate. The New School, together with our 11 co-host organizations and 76 partner organizations and groups, is pleased to host this Mayoral Candidates Forum on the future of food in New York City. Together with other academic institutions such as NYU, Hunter College, and that State University Uptown Columbia, the New School has been a venue for unfolding of food and food policy developments across branches of government, including the offices of the mayor, Manhattan Borough President, and City Council. In 2010, the New School hosted the early unveiling of what became FoodWorks, a vision to improve New York City's food system. FoodWorks is perhaps the most comprehensive food policy framework ever adopted by the council of such a large city. As we've seen with the current mayor, the mayor of New York City has significant influence to make changes in the area of food and community health, so our vote matters. We're delighted that so many of the candidates are able to participate in this forum. We hope that this evening's event provides you with the opportunity to learn about the candidates' positions on food issues and, to quote a Food Systems Network NYC blog post, inspires them with a vision for a better food system. Our moderator for the evening is Professor Marion Nessel, Paulette Goddard Professor of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health at NYU, and one of the most influential thinkers on the future of food in America. She's the author of a number of prize-winning books, including Food Politics, Safe Food, and What to Eat. She writes an influential blog at foodpolitics.com and tweets at Marion Nessel, where she has over 100,000 followers. Her newest book, Eat, Drink, Vote, An Illustrated Guide to Food Politics, is due out in September. We are honored to have Marion Nessel as our moderator for this special forum. Professor Nessel.
Thanks so much. I feel like I need to defend Columbia. I certainly need to defend NYU. Well, This is just so exciting, and I'm so excited and so honored to be here. I get to welcome you. Welcome to the first groundbreaking, I would call this historic, forum for mayoral candidates on the future of food in New York City. I'm not aware of any other forum of this type. I'm not aware that up until this minute, the food movement has been strong enough to get it's now 6 candidates to agree to come speak to us and to answer the questions that we have that concern the issues that we feel most deeply about. This has to be a historic occasion. And look at how many of you there are. I mean, this in itself is amazing. The organizers tell me that this room filled up within a couple of weeks, and we have 2 overflow rooms. It's close to 1,000 people here in the New School who are here to hear what the mayoral candidates have to have. So thank you all for coming, and welcome, welcome to this amazing occasion. To the Twitterers among you, I'm going to read what you say afterwards, so be careful. You've got the hashtag. I think the forum is a tribute to the absolute importance of food in New York City, to its economy, to the society in New York, and to the culture of New York City. And it's also a tribute to the extraordinary work of the co-host organizations and the partner organizations in putting this together. For me, in a way, this, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but this isn't really about the candidates, it's really about us. It's about... They've told me that the first candidate is delayed, so I get to do a little ad-libbing here. So I want to read the names of the co-host organizations, and I mean, I know you know who they are, and I know that they're all in the program, but just think about what this means in bringing these groups together to organize this event. The Brooklyn Food Coalition, which was also involved in holding the Forum for Youth and Community, young people, for community organizations just before this. City Harvest, the Food Bank, the Food Chain Workers Alliance, the Food Systems Network in New York City, the Hunger Action Network, the Just Food, the New School, the NRDC Action Fund, the New York City Coalition Against Hunger, the New York City Food Policy Center at Hunter, and Public Health Solutions. I mean, please, let's thank these organizations for what they did. I came into this late. I was just asked to moderate it. I wasn't really involved in the organization. And I was just telling some people sitting next to me that it's been like dealing with grown-ups. It's been quite an experience. This is the most well-organized event that I've ever seen. It's just been breathtaking in the care in which I see, we're making changes already. One of the things I wanted to say, in addition to that we want to thank the organizations, we also need to thank the funders. We've had financial support from the North Star Fund and from co-host organizations, City Harvest, Public Health Solutions, and the Food Policy Center at Hunter. So let's thank them, please. And one more set of thank yous, and that's to the group of dedicated volunteers who you see throughout here, who are really knocking themselves out, trying to make everything work. So my job is to explain how this rather complicated evening is going to work. One of the things on my script to tell you is that these are all very, very busy politicians, and their schedules are very complicated, and there are going to be lots and lots of changes and last-minute decisions, and you have to cut us a little bit of slack on that. For example, this morning it was 7 candidates, now it's down to 6. And the way this is going to work is that I'm going to ask them 3 of the questions, actually edited versions of 3 of the questions that were generated by the 12 co-host organizations through a very long process of submission, review, and editing. So these were non-trivial questions. They really represent a coalition process of deciding what the issues are that are most important to the groups that were involved in this. Questions were also generated by the Brooklyn Food Coalition in partnership with 6 grassroots organizations that they work with. These are Added Value, Uprose, East New York Farms, Green City Force, the Brooklyn Movement Center, and El Puente. So let's give them applause. And a member of those community groups will ask the candidate a 4th question. And I should say, you have the questions, the candidates have the questions, so everybody should be really well prepared. The candidates who are expected to appear are in their expected order of appearance, subject to last-minute changes: Anthony Weiner, Bill de Blasio, Sal Albanese, John Catsimatidis, Christine Quinn, and John Liu. And so we'll keep you posted on what the actual order will be. And now I have to do a couple of disclaimers. The ground rules, this is a 501c3 funded event, and the ground rules of those require me to state that the views that are expressed are those of the candidates themselves. They are not necessarily the views of the co-host organizations, and they will not necessarily be my views, and we're supposed to keep our views to ourselves. We are to take no position on this. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm really curious to see what the candidates have to say about these questions. And that, I think, takes care of the announcements. I think it's just beyond belief thrilling that the candidates are honoring us and are respecting us by agreeing to talk to us about their thoughts about how best to promote agriculture, food, nutrition, and public health in New York City. And I hope that all of you will give each of them a very warm welcome, a fair and respectful hearing, and your just enthusiastic thanks for them agreeing to come here and answer our questions. And I have to tell you that we have a note taker who is going to be writing down what they say so that all of you can get together afterwards and hold whoever wins accountable. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the first bravest candidate who's going to be speaking to us today, and that's Anthony Weiner, who's a Democrat, formerly a member of the City Council and congressional representative. Mr. Weiner, thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to us today. You are talking to a group of about 1,000. You can't see them all because there are people in overflow rooms, and there are also people watching this on live stream. But these are a group of people who are passionate about food issues, deeply committed to creating a food system that's healthier for people and the planet, and very, very interested to hear your views on how New York City can continue its immense leadership in the area of getting food to people who need it most in the ways that are best for people. So I have 3 questions for you, and you know what the ground rules are. They've been explained to you. You have roughly 2 seconds to answer the questions. You have 1.5 minutes to answer the questions. There are, can the 2 people who are doing the timing, you can see them right there. And they'll give you a 30-second warning and a 10-second warning. And if you go on too long, I'll have to, do something. And there'll be 3 questions from me, and then we'll have a question from a member of the community, and I think you've seen that one as well. So we're all set? Ready, get set, go. My first question is about hunger. Many of the people in this audience are particularly concerned about the extent of hunger in New York City. The count is that more than 1.5 million residents are food insecure, meaning that they don't have a reliable source of food on a day-to-day basis, and our emergency food providers are overwhelmed with the demand. As mayor, what would you do to end or reduce hunger in New York City, and what kinds of benchmarks would you use in order to measure progress in that area?
Well, for one thing, I would put as far in our rearview mirror as possible a very sad chapter in New York civic life when we were the last city in the country who was still fingerprinting women who wanted to get food for their children. It was always available to cities, and almost universally it was rejected because what it turned out it was doing was further stigmatizing something that was the single best program to raise children out of hunger. And I think whatever you think of Mike Bloomberg's record, that is forever going to be a blight on his record. It ultimately took the governor overruling that requirement. So the first thing we need to do is destigmatize the SNAP program. There are still about 500,000 people who are eligible for SNAP in the city who don't get it. We should do everything we can to reduce those barriers. For one thing, we should make it as easy as possible for people to apply for SNAP at every corner of the food service structure, meaning at senior centers, meaning at daycare centers, at schools. Wherever it's possible to plug in a laptop, people should be able to apply for SNAP. Secondly, we should do what we can to add to the value of SNAP. You know, saying to someone, penalizing them because they want to buy an inexpensive drink is not the way to go. We should do what I've proposed, which is give them a 50% or a doubling of the value of their SNAP coupons if they'll buy fresh produce. I think that parents will choose to buy healthier foods if those options are available to them and they can afford to buy them.
Oh, thank you very much for that. The next question is about the food economy in New York City. The New York City food market is worth about $30 billion a year, as somebody has figured out, but many of the workers in this industry don't get very much of that. And many of us are very concerned that nearly 90% of the workers in the food industry earn below a living wage, and nearly 14% of the workers in the food industry are on food stamps. There's something wrong with that. Much more than in other sectors. As mayor, what would you do to improve the wages, benefits, and working conditions of food industry jobs?
Well, we have to do a couple of things. One, we have to have a realistic immigration policy that isn't punitive to people that work in the food service industry. Second, we have to realize that this displacement of middle-class jobs is leading to a net increase in jobs, but only in the nominal sense. Yes, there are more jobs, but they're basically poverty wage jobs. And we should not dislocate our shoulder patting ourselves on the back about the creation of those jobs. All they're doing is burden shifting. Those low wage jobs without benefits are shifting the cost of health care to all of us, or shifting the displacement in jobs, frankly, are hurting society. So the second thing that we should do, in addition to providing health care for all New Yorkers, and I've proposed a single-payer health care plan for all New York, second thing that we should do is we should be unabashed about the idea of the single thing, best thing we can do for food service workers is help them organize. You know, if McDonald's and Walmart and these other places had to deal with an active, vibrant union that was fighting for better conditions and higher wages, that would be good for all of us. For too long, we've had this artificial silo that has existed, is saying the government should stay out of those type of organizing things. They help all New Yorkers when they're able to rise up out of poverty and hunger. And let me just say one other thing about this. I tell you what's starting to happen, and people in the food industry understand this. Middle-class wage earners are now competing for these very low-wage jobs. Who's getting pushed out in that scenario? Young men, particularly men of color, people that have lower education. That's creating about a 30% unemployment rate among people in that sector. That has to change.
Thank you very much for that. And my third question is about health. The Bloomberg administration has proposed and implemented initiatives such as trans fat bans, menu labels, soda taxes, soda caps, a plan to remove sodas from SNAP, poster campaigns. They've really done a lot to try to reduce rates of obesity and diet-related chronic diseases among New Yorkers. As mayor, would you continue these initiatives, and are there other ones that you would take?
I think it's too small-minded, these things. We have 1.2 million New Yorkers have no health insurance. We've closed 13 hospitals in this city in the last 4 years. And here we are, we're concerned about the size of someone's soft drink. The real challenge is we pay $15 billion every single year in health care, and what are we doing? We're giving 25% of it to insurance companies. We're saying that's the way the cookie crumbles, is we're eliminating middle-class jobs that are created in the health sector. If you really want to help people, get them health care. If you really want to help people, feed them. If you really want to help people, give them education in the schools, make it to destigmatize getting school lunches. Look, I appreciate the idea that Mike Bloomberg innovates and leans into problems, but he picks odd ones to lean into, to be honest with you. There are a reason that people are buying 99-cent sodas, is they can't afford the organic milk I feed to my son. That's why they're doing it. There is a reason that we're fighting over 4 or 5 days of days off when you're sick. Heck, we should be trying to figure out a way to get someone checkups, to get a woman mammography before she's in stage 3. We should figure out a way to bring children in to be treated when the first sign of H1N1 flu, not put them on a school bus. These are the ambitious thoughts that New Yorkers should think. We are the healthcare capital of the world. We should have a single-payer, all-inclusive healthcare system that covers all New Yorkers, including the undocumented here in New York.
Can we get, we have a question from a member of the community. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Shanora Heath. Hello. I live in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. My question for the candidate is, in a recent statement, City Council Speaker Christine Quinn said if elected mayor, she would hold kids' meals at restaurant chains such as McDonald's to the same nutrition standards as school lunches. And while the New York City Office of School has made major improvements, including serving whole grain breads instead of white bread, non-fat and reduced fat milk instead of whole milk, yet many of the items served still resemble fast food items. How would you as mayor work with the DOE to address this issue, and what specific recommendations would you make?
Well, I would do a couple of things. One, I would do everything I could to take away the stigma associated with school lunches, with school breakfast. First, I would double the number of school lunches served during the summertime. Just the same way teachers talk about the sliding back that goes on over the months. The amount of hunger actually rises during the summer months when students aren't in school. Second, I would feed them the meals in the classroom. I would even have kind of carts in the hallway. Let the children grab it as they go. Let them try to feel it as much as part of the background as it is walking the street and going by a hot dog stand or halal mart. Anything it takes to destigmatize. What have we learned? And we learn this all kinds of instances of social improvements. It's very often the obstacles we face to solving problems are not that the programs don't exist. The SNAP program actually is a very successful program, lifting children out of hunger. And I hope we get a chance to talk about the Farm Bill before I leave. But I think that if we can figure out ways to make it so that every child feels that one of the things they get when they go to school is a couple of hot meals, that will go a long way. And I know that sometimes there's a conflict between making meals look attractive to a young person and the health of it. But the first thing we need to do is remove the stigma that prevents roughly half a million New Yorkers from getting a SNAP that they should get.
Thank you.
Now, we've got time for one more question.
Ask me about the Farm Bill.
I think we're all on the same page on the Farm Bill. But I thought I might ask you about the governance of food in New York. One of the things that comes up over and over in discussions among the various food organizations is how the city agencies that are dealing with food issues aren't always as coordinated or as transparent as they might be. And we wonder what you as mayor might do to address some of the concerns about that, particularly to allow citizen participation in decision making.
Look, I think that we have a fundamental problem that needs to change in governance, and it's changing everywhere else but not here. You know, we have these 3 silos. 1 is government doing its thing, 2 is business doing its thing, and 3 are the nonprofit sector, the faith-based organization that's doing its thing. Increasingly, you have business people chafing at those distinctions by doing more social entrepreneurship, trying to solve problems. You have nonprofits that almost by definition every single day is trying to fill in the gaps where government is. The mistake we make in government is we never reach out beyond our silo. I've proposed in my idea book, Keys to the City, where it's 64 ideas for the middle class and those struggling to make it, the creation of a nonprofit czar, someone who sits at the table at the highest ranking levels of government and says, you know what, we're here trying to solve problems. Let's see if there's a small faith-based group out in the Bronx doing the same thing. Let's see if there's a soup kitchen that we can help to try to solve these problems. Actually more meals are served to hungry people in non-government agencies than in government agencies. Yet we don't really have a really good handle on how many. You know why? Because we never really ask. We do our very best. Community organizations try to do census where they can. We should be coordinating these activities, all be on the same page. If that were happening over the course of the last 12 years, then I think we would have made a much bigger dent in child hunger in the city, because for too long, hunger organizations have been begging the city of New York to make some changes. Gradually, they're coming along, but it should be a permanent part of governance having a nonprofit czar at the table.
Well, thank you very much. Please thank
Thank
Anthony
you.
Weiner for doing this. Thank you, thank you very much. It's terrific. And do we have our next candidate? We have our next candidate. Please welcome Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio is a public advocate for the city of New York. Welcome. You are talking to a group of about 1,000 passionate foodies, people who are deeply devoted to trying to improve our food system, make sure everybody gets fed adequately, and that we have a food system that is good for people and the planet. So the ground rules have been explained. Yes. You have about a minute and a half to answer the questions, and off we go. My first one is about Hunts Point. The Hunts Point produce market provides nearly 2/3 of the city's fresh fruits and vegetables, but it's been over capacity for decades and is in bad need of redevelopment. Anybody who's been there can say that. Fixing it requires thinking about how the market could provide jobs and food for the neighborhood in which it resides, how it could reduce pollution, promote regional food, and be part of a much broader vision for food in New York City. What's your vision for the Hunts Point market? And as mayor, how would you get to that vision?
Well, thank you, Marion. Thanks to the New School. Thank you to all of the sponsors. Many people in this room, many organizations I've had the honor of fighting shoulder to shoulder with for food security in this town over the last 12 years. So I just want to thank the extraordinary movement. And by the way, a movement that put the food issue on the map in New York City over the last decade or so. Congratulations for that incredibly important achievement.
Yes.
To me, one of the things we all have to do as progressives, as activists, is start to connect the notion of environmental sustainability, food supply sustainability with economic sustainability, and recognize that a lot of what we're going to be doing in the future is figuring out how to live on this earth more appropriately, and that in fact there are a lot of jobs that come out of that. If we help to reorient over time the Hunts Point market to produce that's grown near to New York City, just like I think we need to reorient in the purchasing approach of New York City government, our schools, and all the agencies buy food to local produce to the maximum extent possible. I think it's going to have a profound effect on employment patterns, on climate, et cetera. Hunts Point we need to save in New York City. We need to redevelop it and make it more sustainable for the long term. But and there's incredible employment opportunities with it. But the bottom line to me is I want a Hunts Point market that's reoriented over time to produce from our broader tri-state area as part of an overall effort to wean us off a culture of produce from 3,000 miles away.
Yeah. The next question is about school food. New York City schools serve about 850,000 students a day, but the school meals face two problems: low participation rates and lots of complaints about the quality of the food. Some of that is standard.
Some of that is kids. I have teenagers. Some of that is teenagers.
Sourcing local and sustainable foods could help a lot, but few schools have the facilities or the staff who can deal with fresh foods from scratch. Some of us would love to see universal school meals, breakfast in the classroom, and an investment in building kitchens and in training food service staff. As mayor, what would you do to increase participation in the program and improve the quality of the school meals?
First of all, I think we're missing an opportunity to use available federal funding to make school lunches free. And I think we have to end any stigma around school lunches and universalize it. It's crucial. Second, I actually respect Bloomberg administration policies on public health greatly and will continue the vast majority of them, but I disagree fundamentally on the breakfast issue. We have to get food in kids' hands. We have too many hungry kids in this city. We have too many kids who are not learning because they're hungry and are not getting quality food. That is much more pressing from my point of view. There are valid concerns about obesity, but we have to lean into school breakfast and make that universal. That's crucial for the future of this city. In terms of the quality, there's no question, again, a constant movement towards local agriculture, local produce is going to help in quality and taste and everything. We all know that inherently. And I think the investments we make to make food, good quality food, more appealing to our young people are very good ones. So I think some of the capital funding to update our cafeterias. I'm someone who believes we need to put proportionally more capital funding into schools. Let's be clear, it will come from somewhere else in our capital budget. But I think the investment in schools is necessary at this point, including the cafeteria upgrades that would allow us to provide a healthier, more appetizing kind of food for our kids. All of that taken together, I think, revolutionizes our approach to getting kids the healthy food they need.
Oh, well, thank you for that. The next question is about the governance of food in New York City. We have multiple agencies doing multiple aspects of the food system. We have a coordinator at the level of the mayor's office, and there's a task force. But many of the groups here feel that that's not enough, that it's not coordinated enough, and that they don't have access or understand enough about what's going on, and they would like input into city policies and programs. As mayor, would you support broader governance of food functions and a process that encourages citizen participation?
Yes, very much so. Look, as I said, there's areas where I agreed with the mayor in some of his public health and environmental policies. There's many, many other areas where I've disagreed. And I think one of the greatest gaps, one of the greatest problems in the Bloomberg years was there was not a respect for stakeholders in this city. The Bloomberg administration was the ultimate elitist administration, a top-down approach to government, not understanding that New York City is actually a city of stakeholders that right now are making change on the ground and bettering people's lives way ahead of the government. And it's time for the government to recognize that and start listening to the stakeholders. There's also the Bloomberg administration was not particularly keen on transparency. And I think putting up the metrics, constantly showing how many kids are we feeding lunch to? How many kids are we feeding breakfast to? How many folks are on food stamps versus those who should be on food stamps that we're still not reaching, and why? You know, what quality, what kind of food are we bringing into our schools and our other city facilities? I think all of this needs to be very transparent. And I would say this, what I learned from the years I worked as a staffer in City Hall. It's great to have a coordinator. It is much better to have a deputy mayor charged with the responsibility. If you really want focus and impact, there has to be a deputy mayor who, among their responsibilities, is coordination of all food policies, and it has to be a very public mandate to actually bring these policies into alignment for the greatest effect for our people. If it's just a coordinator, it will not have the same effect. Someone with real power needs to govern over moving our food policies forward.
So you would appoint such a person?
One of the deputy mayors, of which there are typically 5, maybe 6, in my administration would have clear responsibility for coordinating all those areas.
Well, thank you for that. Are we ready for the community question? We are ready for the community question.
Hello, my name is Derica Cruikshank, and I'm from the Lower East Side, NYC Housing, and I would just like to ask a question.
Speak into the microphone, please.
What plans do you have for implementing changes to allow more stores to have food stamp access?
Look, I think this is the story of this last decade or so, and a lot of, again, people in this room participated, and I was very proud to be actively involved as chairman of the General Welfare Committee in the council and then as advocate. The story is finally recognizing what a powerful role the city could play in getting more and more people access to SNAP. The technological piece of it, making sure that stores, green markets, et cetera, all were outfitted to have the technological capacity, that was part of the equation. But I still, and I would further that effort and keep working to make sure that any place that food is sold to people that doesn't yet have that technology, the city should be actively involved in making sure it's available. But I still think the bigger piece to achieve is to reach the many, many tens of thousands of people who qualify for SNAP and aren't getting it, and to change the still very burdensome approach the city takes. We just got finished demonizing food stamp participation through fingerprinting. That was a decade-long struggle. But there's still a struggle to make it easy and accessible through all of the ways that government reaches people, and that's what I'd focus on.
Great.
Thank you.
It turns out we have time for another question. So I'm going to ask about the city's procurement ability. The city buys a lot of food in lots and lots of different ways, and hundreds of millions of dollars worth. And yet it doesn't seem to be coordinated in a way, and it also isn't used very purposefully. Would you, as mayor, try to reorganize the procurement process to try, for example, to promote regional and local agriculture or getting food in from areas around the city?
Absolutely. We have an opportunity here. Let me just make clear, the biggest city in the country, the strongest city government, we have a huge impact on the market. And it's not a shocker that in the Bloomberg years that capacity wasn't utilized, because the mayor really had a kind of laissez-faire approach to the economic role of government. I take a very opposite approach. I think New York City can be a market maker. I think we can focus our spending power on produce from our region. And work with other cities to do the same and really start to change the approach in this country. If we want to address climate change, if we want to address the many, many problems created by consumerism in this culture, and start to align ourselves to what we're going to need to do in the future, we're going to have to change market dynamics. A few years ago, I proposed a notion the mayor's picked up on recently of a styrofoam ban. And people said, well, what about the alternatives? They're expensive. There's relatively few kinds. And I said, if New York City jumps in and starts purchasing on a large level the kind of organic options available, we won't need styrofoam anymore. Those options will become cheap. They'll become plentiful. And we'll work with other cities around the country and change the culture, change the reality. We can do this if we start to break the back of produce from 3,000 miles away. If we start to create the notion that local produce can be affordable and it's the only way to go for the future of our environment and our health, we will change this country for the long haul. We can do that in New York City.
Please join me in thanking Bill de Blasio.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce Sal Albanese, who was a 4-term city councilman and has come to join us today. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming. You're talking to about 1,000 passionate, dedicated people who are concerned about food and the way it's grown, the way it's delivered.
See that.
And many of them are in other overflow rooms and also watching it on live stream. And all of us really care a lot about food and the food system. We're so grateful to you for coming and talking to us about it. The ground rules are you have about 1.5 minutes to answer the questions. There's a timer right there. And I've got 3 questions for you, and then there'll be one from the community. And the first one is about food access. The city has made enormous progress in increasing New Yorkers' access to healthy food with programs such as Health Bucks and Stay Healthy and the Green Carts. And it's expanded farmers markets and their acceptance of EBT cards. And we've also seen more community gardens and urban gardens, but access to fresh food is still an enormous problem for many New Yorkers. As mayor, how would you use the city's financial and other resources to improve access to healthier food for people in the city?
Well, thank you, and commend all of the sponsors for this great turnout on a very important issue. We have 1.5 million New Yorkers that still have, an incredibly wealthy city, don't have access to good food. And under an Albanese administration, I would set up a food policy council to make sure, with teeth, to advise the mayor on how do we get food to all New Yorkers. Community gardens, urban farmers, upstate farmers have to be involved in the process, so we address food deserts in the city. And I would encourage those entities to grow in this city by making sure that all of the empty land that we have can be used for community gardens, to acquire community gardens, and also to incentivize these markets, green markets, to go into our inner city, into some of our poor communities, to make sure that those folks have access to fresh food, and also fresh and healthy food, and to make sure that all of our youngsters in our schools have access to good food. I was a school teacher for 11 years, and I sometimes did lunch duty, and I remember how many times the kids dumped the food in the garbage because it didn't taste good. So we have to make sure it tastes good and it's healthy in our schools. That's essential, and under an Albanese administration, we would move in that direction.
Well, thank you very much. The next question is about the health of New Yorkers. Chronic diseases like obesity and diabetes have become very prevalent in New York. And the Bloomberg administration took a lot of different kinds of initiatives, like menu labeling, which went national, and various other kinds of the big health campaigns in the subways, to try to help people reduce their levels of obesity and diabetes and so forth. As mayor, would you continue those kinds of initiatives? What kinds of initiatives would you add? And how would you deal with chronic diseases among New Yorkers?
I think that the mayor's policies make sense. However, I would go beyond that. I have a master's in health. I taught nutrition in our schools, so I understand how important this is. And one of the things that I want to make sure happens is that all of our young people in the city have health and physical education from kindergarten up, so that they understand the importance of physical fitness and the importance of good food, so we can address diabetes and obesity before it becomes a full-grown problem. I would work hard to do that. Also, let's be honest. Part of the problem that we have is we have income inequality in the city. People don't have living wage jobs. They can't afford decent food. So that's at the very core of this problem. And I'm proud of the fact that I authored the city's first living wage law in 1996, where in 4 different areas of the city's contracting process, contractors had to pay their workers $12 an hour plus health benefits. That was in 1996. Here we are in 2013. I spent 15 years in the private sector. I come back, we're debating a $9 an hour minimum wage, not even linked to inflation. I think that's a travesty. So I want to expand living wage legislation across the contracting process. New York City has the economic leverage of a nation, of some large nations. I want to use that leverage to make sure our citizens are paid a living wage, not $7.50 an hour. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about how you would go about doing that.
Well, I've already done it, so it's pretty simple. As I said, my bill in 1996 put $3 billion in the pockets of 70,000 workers. And I authored the bill. Mayor Giuliani vetoed it. We overrode his veto. And that was only in 4 sectors of the city's contracting out process. I want to expand it to all sectors of the city's contracting out process. We contract out about $18 billion of services every single year. There's no reason that incredible leverage should not be used to provide living wage jobs. I think it's a travesty that we have adults working McDonald's and Burger King for $7.50 an hour, working 2 jobs. It's not teenagers, people who have families, and that has to be addressed. I want to make sure that we increase the minimum wage. I'm going to use the bully pulpit to do that and index it to inflation. So those are things that a mayor can do, and when I come before you, it's not hypothetical. I've already done it, and my bill was a trendsetter across America. When it was passed, it was copied across the country. I testified in Chicago, in Los Angeles, and in Philadelphia, promoting the same bill. So I've done it, I know how to do it, and I will do it again, because that really will get to the crux of people being able to afford quality food here in the city.
Right. And, let me ask just one quick one here, and that's about urban agriculture. The city has about 5,000 acres of land that's available that could be farmed, or could have little plots of land on it that could be farmed. As mayor, what policies would you pursue that would allow people access to the limited information that they have about these kinds of things, and that would make it easier for people to start farming on city land?
I would make sure sure that all of the land is on a computer, so people would have digital access to all the land that we have in the city that could be used for urban farmers and for community gardens. And I also want to point out, I think most of you know what's happening in the city. There's huge pressure for development and the elimination of some of these community gardens to be luxury condos. I'm the only candidate in this race that's not accepting contributions from developers because we can all sit here and tell you we're going to do X, Y, and Z. But when you look at the campaign finance of all of my opponents, you will see the huge amount of money that is funding their campaigns from the development community in the city. That they're interested in. I guess obviously they're profit oriented, like any other business. They want to build luxury condos. That's where the money is. That's why libraries are being sold off, and hospitals and community gardens are part of that issue. So we've got to preserve them. And I want to be a mayor that makes decisions on the merits. That's why I have drawn a very clear line. No contributions from developers, because I want to make decisions on the merits. People will know where those community gardens are. I want to have policies in place so we can acquire more, preserve them, because they really add a tremendous amount in terms of food and also the quality of life, the greenery, environmental soundness of neighborhoods. They're a big difference. As I travel around the city, they really are a positive force, and I want to continue to have them grow and make sure we preserve them.
Thank you. And now we have a question from our community member. Introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Selena Gonzalez. I live in Red Hook. My question for the candidate is, many young people are aware of the health crisis caused by the proliferation of unhealthy foods in low-income communities and communities of color, and wish to change their habits and eat more healthy meals. However, many young people don't know how to prepare nutritious meals because oftentimes their parents don't have that knowledge and they aren't educated about nutrition in school. What would you do to promote nutrition education for New Yorkers of all ages?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you used the word Red Hook, not Carroll Gardens. I'm a Brooklynite, so I'm very familiar with the neighborhood. What I would do is use our schools. One of the things that I pride myself on, is having taught for 11 years, is that the schools were a center of community activity, especially when I grew up in Brooklyn, in a neighborhood that was a Park Slope in those days. It used to be called South Brooklyn in those days. But what the schools were open 7 days a week. The buildings were a central point of activity where parents came in, and I want to offer parents. I want to rate principles on how they bring parents into the process and work with them on nutrition education, not only with them, with their children as well. I think it's very, very important, because that's physical fitness and good nutrition. That's the way to prevent diabetes and obesity. And I'm going to make that there's also a money saver for the city. It's fiscally sound, because that costs us huge amounts of money later on. We're a crisis-oriented city. I want to be a proactive mayor and address these things early on. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sal Albanese, I want to thank you very much for coming. Please thank him. Thank him. It was great. And it's my pleasure now to introduce the next candidate. Whoops. You're good. I'm good. Okay. You never know. The next candidate is John Catsimatidis, who's president and CEO of the Red Apple Group and of Gristedes Foods. So please welcome candidate Catsimatidis. Marion Messel, how do you do? Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. I have all these notes here. Thank you very, very much for coming to speak with us. You are talking to a group of about 1,000 passionate foodies, many of them who probably shop at your stores.
Great audience.
A great audience. Some of them are in rooms that are not here, and a lot of people are watching this on live stream. And these are people who really care about food, who care about where food comes from, how it's grown, how it's produced, how it's transported, and who gets it.
I guess I'm the most experienced here, right?
You may be. You may very well be.
44 years.
44 years. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and you have about a minute and a half to answer them. The timers are all right there. Please stick to the time.
I can't see that far.
You can't see that far? They're pretty big. He's got pretty big, they have pretty big signs.
Thank you.
And my first question then is, this is probably a softball question for you, and it's about hunger in New York City. Many of us in this audience are very concerned about the inability of people to buy food or to have access to food. There are probably more than 100 to 1.5 million residents and 1 out of every 4 children who don't have a reliable source of food because they can't afford it or don't have access to it. And we're seeing emergency food providers experiencing enormous demands. As mayor, what would you do to end or reduce hunger among New York City residents? And what kind of benchmarks would you set so that you would know whether you're making adequate progress?
Well, I'm glad you asked me the question. Like I said, of all the candidates, I'm probably the most knowledgeable of what's going on. A few years ago, I met with Amanda Burden, who was concerned. She was concerned about how we can get food into some of the neighborhoods that weren't getting them because of. And I gave her great suggestions, and I think she used it, to increase the zoning in the new buildings going up and induce the landlords to rent to food stores and be able to have more food stores in our poorer neighborhoods. One of the biggest problems in New York for pricing, and I'm the one that knows, the rent in New York City stores is 10% of store sales. The rent in New Jersey stores are 1.5% of store sales.
That's amazing.
The electric bill in New York is 3% of store sales. The electric bill in New Jersey is 1.5% store sales. Just those 2 items alone, the differential is 10% of your food dollar. And it's not acceptable. And as mayor, what I want to do is create incentives for the rents to come down because supermarkets should come under a category that is essential services to the neighborhood.
Well, thank you for that. This is also a question I'm very eager to hear your answer to this one, and that has to do with the Hunts Point Market, which I suspect you know something about. The Hunts Point Market provides 2/3 of the fresh food to people in New York. It's a mess. I think it's fair to say. It's been overcapacity for really a long time. It really needs redevelopment. And in thinking about fixing it, a lot of people think it should do a lot more than it's doing. It should be good to the neighborhood. It should reduce pollution. It should promote regional food. It should just do all these really good things that a lot of people care about. As mayor, do you have a vision for Hunts Point Market, and what would you do about it?
Since I was 18 years old, that's a long time ago, I used to get up to Hunts Point Market at 4 o'clock in the morning before I would go to school, Bronx campus of NYU, when there was one.
When there was one, alas.
The Hunts Point Market is a great market. It should be expanded. We should give better road access to Hunts Point. And you know what it all comes down to? Getting product cheaper into Hunts Point and being able to deliver it to the stores, because it's all about transportation. If you want to get a truckload of product from California, it's going to cost you about $3 to $4 a case. When we're buying product, because we have our own warehouse in Hunts Point, when we buy product from New Jersey, Long Island, or upstate New York, we get great product for only $1 a case because it's less gasoline, less transportation. So I would encourage more products to come into Hunts Point from the local markets, and I believe that will help bring prices down.
Okay, good. There are, in New York, many city agencies that are involved in feeding the poor, in providing food to one or another institution, hospitals, prisons, shelters, all kinds of things. But these aren't, administering food stamps would be another one. These aren't very well coordinated, and there is a coordinator's office in the mayor's office now and a task force, but many of the people here who are working with these institutions feel that they're not responsive or transparent enough, and we're wondering if you as mayor what would you do about coordinating food issues in the mayor's office?
Well, it's an industry I've been in for 44 years, and I really feel I would do my part to make sure it's coordinated better, to be able to get more food stamps into the hands of people that need them in our poorer neighborhoods, to be able to get more WIC into hands of people that need them. I think it's so very important. And the one additional thing that I would work very hard at is to try to avoid fraud when it happens in the food stamp program. But the WIC program is one of the best programs around. You know why? It gives you specified what the person could buy, milk, essential services for children, and they have to buy those products. And they're both great programs, and I would encourage them, and I would have the mayor's office work very hard to make sure we get them into more hands.
All right, thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question, and that is the food economy question. One of the things that many of us are very concerned about is that even though New York City's food market, and this is a good one for you, is worth $30 billion a year, the workers in the industry don't get very much of that. And many of us are extremely concerned that 90% of the workers in the food industry get below a living wage. 14% of them are on food stamps, which seems amazing. And that's much more than in other sectors. As mayor, what would you do to improve the wages, benefits, and working conditions of food industry jobs?
Well, I'm one of the only people running for mayor that I was a member of a union. I was a member of Local 338, the grocery union. My stores, for 44 years I've been running them, we have all union members. The average wage in our stores is over $20 an hour. With benefits, it's probably $25 an hour. So I would encourage people to have a better living wage. And where the problem begins is some of the smaller stores where they're not unionized and they're just running a small operation of 2 or 3 people. But the larger chains are all unionized with the average wages of over $20. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. And are we ready for the community question? We have someone from the community who's prepared a question. Please introduce yourself.
Well, good evening. My name is David Sosa. I'm from Sunset Park. And my question for the candidate is, well, I don't know if you know this, but Sunset Park will be home to a large rooftop organic farm owned by Bright Farms, Inc. And what will you do to ensure this local produce is not just being grown here for other communities, but that we in the community of Sunset Park will have access to this food?
Well, like I said, I believe in local produce. And the other thing I really, really believe is, and you did mention organic, right?
Yep.
We've went, in the last 5 years in our stores, we went from about 2% of the products being organic to close to 15 to 17%. I believe in organic foods. When my kids were growing up, I made sure they had organic milk and organic eggs and organic chicken. I would encourage, and maybe I really encourage organic products being sold in the stores in New York, and I would push it, and I would give some kind of credits towards it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Can you handle another question?
I'm here to, like I said, I think I'm the most knowledgeable in this business.
So how about, did I ask you about hunger? We have a lot of people, I've already asked you that one. What haven't I asked? I've completely lost track, everybody. Anybody have a favorite question that they want to?
The one thing that I've been encouraging,
Hunger and school food?
I've been encouraging that, supermarkets, by tradition, not necessarily mine, try to deliver. Our problem in Manhattan, where most of our stores are, is the rent. Mm-hmm. Supermarkets try to deliver the best product for the lowest possible price. And I've been encouraging all the supermarkets to carry more organic foods because they can deliver it to the neighborhoods at a cheaper price. Because some of the smaller stores that do organic, it costs a lot of money. I want to bring the price of organics down so everybody in our city could afford them because it's healthier for them to have it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
But let's ask the hunger question. So many of us are concerned about hunger.
I'm not leaving.
In New York City. Good. As mayor, what would you do to end or reduce hunger in the city, and what kinds of benchmarks would you use to measure progress?
I think that, like I said, the food stamp system and the WIC system is great. And what I would do is use the mayor's office to make sure people in our poorer neighborhoods are getting the services that they're entitled to. And I think we have to go neighborhood by neighborhood and make sure we take care of our people. I'm running as a Republican liberal. I'm running as a liberal because I want to make sure we take care of our kids, and I want to make sure we take care of our elderly. And that's my two missions. I've been a member of the Police Athletic League 28 years, helping the kids in the poorer neighborhoods to get out. I grew up on 135th Street. I grew up in Harlem. I want to be able to go back to Harlem and tell all those kids, I made it, you can make it too. And that's my mission. Give those kids hope and give them a hand to get out. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. John Catsimatidis, please thank him. Please welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
We're going to do a chat, and Sarah and I are going to walk around with the microphones for the audience.
Okay.
15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Neither candidate has come? Oh, we are? How did that happen? Okay, we're... let's see. Poll the crowd. All right. I love this. This is so much fun. I've never been quite so flexible about these things for something that was as well organized. As I said, there would be glitches and there would be delays, and we apparently have one now. So this is a very good opportunity to just let me hear from you how you think things are going. It feels a little rigid to me, but there's nothing I can do about it. Because the rules are very clear that we're not to get into arguments and we're not to... You have no idea how hard this is for me. Thank you. So, thank you very much. So I think that what's going to happen is that people are going to go around the audience and do some polling. Is that right? What's the plan? I'm good. I'm just supposed to wing it.
What are you going to do to let people know about what you heard tonight?
Okay. I actually have some things I want to talk about, and I was going to do it at the end, so I'll do it now. As I said, I think the most important feature of this event is the event. You're hearing from the candidates. The answers are it's very hard for me to listen to what they're saying because I'm worrying about the time and everything else that's going on. But fortunately, we have a note taker who's listening very carefully. But I think what this is really about is is that the food movement has gotten to the point where candidates have to listen to it. And they have to be concerned about the issues that we're concerned about: hunger, governance, what's happening in the city, getting food to hungry people, getting healthier food to everybody. And that, it seems to me, is just an extraordinary achievement. I taught a class at NYU last semester in food advocacy. And one of the big issues that we discussed in that, I'm trying to teach students how to advocate. Most people can just sort of figure it out. But it turns out there's a literature on this, as there is on most things. And one of the issues that we discussed was the issue that Michael Pollan raised. Michael Pollan, by the way, is very interested in this event and said that he would be watching it on live stream. And because of his interest in bringing the various disparate parts of the food movement, the 12 co-host organizations, and the 70 other organizations that are part of this, together into something that has some political clout. This is the first example I've seen of real political clout in the food movement, and that's why I'm so enormously moved by it and think this is just really important. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. The real question is what we do next. And so in talking to the note taker, can you tell me what your name is again? Hillary, and talking to Hillary, the note taker, what she's doing is creating a record. And what that record will do will be, we don't know who's going to win the election for mayor, but what the record will do will be to allow this group to hold the mayor accountable for what they said as candidates. I mean, really simple part of the political process is to do that. And it seems to me that the kinds of things that we should all be thinking about while this is going on is what happens next. How do we build on this? How do we take the 12 organizations and the 70 or 75 other organizations that are participating in this and bring them together into a coalition that will really make serious political change in New York and the world, because New York does lead, and many of the initiatives that the Bloomberg administration started have gone national. Whether you like them, dislike them, think that they're trivial or non-trivial, they've gone national and they've set an agenda for many, many other places throughout the country. I think we have an enormous opportunity here, and the question is how to go about doing that. So I'm hoping that the leaders of this organization and the people who put this together are thinking about that as we wait for the other candidates to arrive. And I assume they will at some point get here. They're politicians. I once, I don't know, I mean, this is so, they're all on their way, whatever that, they're having bad subway karma. I want to bet that they're not having bad subway karma. They're having bad limousine karma. They're on city bikes. The bikes aren't available. Their keys aren't working in the lock. I don't know. It's hard to get around in New York. So, okay, one of the things I need to do is to thank the funders again, so let's thank the funders again. But I particularly want to thank Caitlin Sarimi, who is the person who is the organizer of this. Caitlin, where are you? Caitlin, are you here? Is she here? She's looking for the limousines. Why did I think it wasn't a bicycle? I think she's done. I really didn't get involved in this until Monday when I had a meeting with Thomas and with Caitlin and with Ed Yowell. And they kind of laid out for me what I was going to be doing at this. And I was kind of overwhelmed. I'm not used to dealing with this level of organization and the thoughtfulness that has gone into this and the level of flexibility, understanding that this could be a complete disaster and somehow hoping that it wouldn't be a complete disaster, but would somehow end up being something that would be very important. When people ask, why are you doing this? And it was one of Michael Pollan's question, is what is this about? Well, ostensibly, it's about getting everybody interested in this election and creating groundswell of support for candidates who are interested in these kinds of issues and are willing to put forward the agenda. But I think that my answer to him was what this is about was really simple. It's growing the food movement. That's really what this is about. And I don't know whether the candidates realize it or whether they care, but I care very deeply. And I was very, very honored and thrilled to be asked to try to fill in for the time here. As I explained to the organizers, I'm a classroom teacher. I can talk for 50 minutes without a break and give you an exam afterwards. So actually, we could talk about what the exam is here. There's a microphone on the floor. If any of you want to line up and say something, there's a microphone right here. This is your opportunity to ask questions of the organizers, ask questions of me. The only thing that we're not allowed to do is to discuss the candidates individually. That's the only thing that's off limits. You can discuss the issues, however. So if anybody would like to stand up and help with the time killing, that would be just great. I'm at the stage where I need help. So, microphone? Joel. I might have known.
I'm Joel Berg.
Joel Berg.
Joel Berg with the New York State Coalition Against Hunger. I hope all of you know that the stakes involved in the debate over the Farm Bill go way beyond sustainable agriculture and our food supply and food safety, the very survival of 47 million Americans who rely on the SNAP program. For all this talk that the House is evil and the Senate bill was fine, George W. Bush, a few years ago, proposed a $1.1 billion cut in SNAP, and all the Democrats went berserk. The Senate Farm Bill, passed by the Democratic Senate, if enacted into law, is cutting $4 billion. That's nearly 4 times what George W. Bush proposed. Every soup kitchen, food pantry, food bank, and food rescue group in America provides roughly about $4 or $5 billion worth of food. So if the Senate Democratic Farm Bill gets enacted into law, that's as if every food charity in America did not exist for an entire year. The House bill is worse. It's 4 times as bad. It's as if every food charity in America did not exist for 5 years. That was the version that failed. The version that passed eliminated any discussion of the SNAP program whatsoever. This is 47 million Americans depending on $80 billion worth of food. The SNAP program is the only thing standing between us and mass starvation like the developing world. It's a huge supply of income for farmers markets, for CSAs, so all the things everyone in here cares about are reliant on this. And it's virtually the only part of the anti-poverty safety net left for poor people. In New York City over the last decade, the number of people getting SNAP, rightfully so because the economy went to crap, increased by 900,000 people. The number of people getting cash assistance decreased by 100,000. SNAP is the only thing people have left. So speaking just on my behalf of the New York City Coalition Against Hunger, I hope you leave here tonight, call Senator Gillibrand's office, thank her for her leadership. She's been spectacular on this. Tell her to keep it up. Tell Senator Schumer, remind him that he is in leadership in the United States Senate. He's the 3rd ranking member of the United States Senate. And to get Harry Reid to stop, frankly, lying about this and claiming that the Senate Democratic Farm Bill is just cutting a loophole when it's taking real food away from real families. Call your members of the House of Representatives if they vote against the Farm Bill, as most of them did. Thank them and tell them to keep it up, don't cave. And call Congressman Grimm, the only member of the House of Representatives or the Senate from New York State, in New York City area, who voted to implement $20 billion of cuts in funding for low-income people. Hold them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you very much. Thank you. If we get another delay, I'll give a lecture on the Farm Bill. We now are we ready for the next candidate? Yes. The next candidate is Christine Quinn. Please welcome candidate Quinn. Yes, on her way? Another minute or two. Oh, you're going to get my lecture on the Farm Bill. I taught a course on the Farm Bill at NYU a couple of years ago. It was not one of my happiest teaching experiences. I felt really sorry for the students. Reading the Farm Bill is not fun. It was 1,000 pages, and it's completely incomprehensible. And my take-home lesson for it, which was very unsatisfactory from teaching purposes, is that it's not something that's comprehensible. There are pieces of it that are comprehensible. The food stamp part of it is comprehensible, and what's happening with it is reprehensible. But the rest of it, the farm supports are opaque, complicated. It's a collection of hundreds and hundreds of programs that have nothing whatsoever to do with one another. They're all about lobbying and special interest groups and things that have gotten in because some agriculture committee person wanted to pay off a donor. It's really a sad commentary on American democracy. And I thought it was pretty bad a couple of years ago. What's happening now is just so shocking and unbelievable, and I really want to thank Joel for his eloquent defense of it. I believe we now have the next candidate. Please welcome Christine Quinn.
How are you?
Very well.
Are we sitting?
Marion Ethel, you're sitting, yeah. Candidate Quinn, we're so grateful to you for getting here. I thought maybe you were having bad subway karma.
No.
You're talking here to about 1,000 passionate, dedicated, devoted foodies, people who care about food, not only the way it tastes and love to eat like I do, but also care about the politics of food and where it comes from and where it's going. And we're all so grateful to you for agreeing to come and talk to us. The ground rules are you get about 1.5 minutes to answer the questions. The questions were developed by the people who are here, and they care very much about the issues. Great. So your first question is about the food economy. The New York City food marketplace is worth about $30 billion a year, but many of the workers in the industry don't get to participate in very much of it. 90% of them don't make a living wage. 14% of food service workers are on food stamps, more than in other sectors. And as mayor, what would you do to improve the wages, benefits, and working conditions of the food industry?
Well, first of all, thank you all for organizing this tonight. A lot of you are folks that we've worked with in the almost 8 years I've been speaker on food-related issues, and I just want to thank you for keeping your activism going in this context. And you know, the food economy is one of the key economic areas we need to harness to diversify New York City's economy so we're not so reliant on Wall Street and Albany. And Wall Street and Albany, what the heck was that about? Governor Cuomo must be thinking of me. Wall Street and real estate. And I'll give you one example of the potential of that. A few years ago in the city council, we helped convert, through council funding, an old factory in East Harlem into a food incubator, La Marqueta. That food incubator has facilitated the creation of 32 food startups, one of which a woman who makes cake pops. Now, she on average employs, 3 or 4 or 5 folks. The second to last time I saw her, she had gotten a contract to make 8,000 cake pops for NBC's launching of their new season. The last time I saw her, she was doing ABC's food, cake pops for their launch. So now she's employing tons of people. So we need to harness that potential. Now, in the other part of the food economy, which isn't really the startup, there are a couple of different things we can do there. One, we need to recognize that find ways, if any of these companies are part of the city's food purchasing, through those contracts, we should put in requirements around living wage standards. I don't know how many are, quite frankly, but there might be, 1 or 2 in there. Second, we need to use the city's purchasing power in every way we can. You know, New York City is the second biggest institutional food purchaser in the world, second only to the United States military. That's food purchasing power we've never really harnessed in a way. Now, in specific, in some of the workers you're talking about are basically fast food workers. And that's an issue where there's a whole citywide campaign going on about that, right? And the fast food workers, though, is a particular citywide campaign right now where I've been proud to work with and stand with those workers, and will continue to do that when I'm mayor.
Thank you. The second one is about health.
I'm against it. It's overrated health. Next. No, I'm kidding. It's overrated.
The Bloomberg administration has proposed and implemented a lot of initiatives, and you've had quite a bit to say about quite a number of them. And I'm wondering, as mayor, would you continue some of these initiatives? Would you have new ones you want to talk about?
Sure.
What you're doing in there?
Let me talk about some of the ideas that I put out recently. Mm-hmm. We put out recently 4 or 5 point, I can't remember which, plan around children's health issues. And one of the points in that plan was to take children's meals. So if you go to a fast food restaurant or go to a chain like a Applebee's or something, you see children's meals on there. And I think for a lot of people, there's an assumption that if an establishment is marketing something as a child's meal, it's going to be good for your child. Now, good for your child, a fair way to define that would be a USDA standard. Not so much if you look at the meals. And surprisingly, when we did an analysis, Taco Bell was actually way better, I'm not singing their praises, than like an Applebee's. So we would pass a law when I'm mayor that says if you're going to market a children's meal, you have to meet USDA health standards for those meals. In some of the chain restaurants, for example, the sodium level was quadruple what it would be by USA standards. Now, we also need to make sure children have access to the health care that they need. It's not just about what they eat, but it's also about health care. That's why I've committed as mayor to start, and then go further, but start by doubling the number of children's health clinics in public schools. And the interesting thing is when you calculate in reimbursement and whatnot, it only costs us a little over $100,000 a year more than the school nurse costs us, which is, of course, a requirement. Now, let me say something else that's really important about health moving forward, particularly children's health. There's a big debate going on right now about the city's solid waste management plan. And part of that plan is very similar, I think, to some of the fundamental philosophies of the food movement, that we should have a level of environmental justice and that every neighborhood needs to participate. We need to move forward with that plan to get 6 million miles of truck miles off of the street, to get asthma rates down, because one of the things that holds children back, and this was part of our plan as well, from physical activity, is their high level of asthma rates. And one of the things we know about the school health clinics is they have reduced sometimes by double the number of ER visits of children in those schools, and children who are less likely to be in the ER with asthma and other problems are more likely to be in school and more likely to do much better in school. So those are some of the areas we'd start looking at, but we would want to look at others to see if there's more we can also do about the quality of the meals we're serving through all of the different ways the city serves meals, and also how can we make meals through city institutions more available. You know, I really want to move to universal in-classroom breakfast. Instead of being something principals opt into, we would want to do just an opt-out if they want it out. Mm-hmm. Schools that have high levels of children who are very low income, we should move those schools to beginning to do school dinners. And we should also coordinate better between food pantry and food supply institutions and schools, so children who are in schools that are getting free lunch, free breakfast, there's no reason why they're not getting a meal packed to take home on Friday for the weekends. We've seen that happen in other cities. What you need is coordination between schools and food pantries.
Good, thank you. This is the governance question. There are a lot of city agencies that are involved in buying foods, and there's a coordinator at the mayor's office and a task force, but a lot of us think that that's really not enough. It's not doing what it needs to be, and it also lacks transparency and doesn't really give citizen participants a chance to weigh in on food policies in the city. As mayor, what would your view be about doing something about that?
Well, I think the Office of the Food Policy Coordinator, which is something that I had called for in my plan Food Works, which was I liked to call the first holistic view of the look at the city's food system, the first ground to garbage can look at the city's food system. And one of the recommendations was for there to be a food policy coordinator in the mayor's office. So I think and feel it's a good accomplishment we have that position. Now that said, we need to engage much more broadly all of the folks and stakeholders who are out there in a much bigger, much more engaged advisory board to that and to the mayor's office. And there is no reason why the proceedings of those meetings couldn't be webcast, the minutes made public, but we want to energize that position in a significant way where we're getting input from all of the stakeholders, so we're really using it to coordinate all of the different agencies. And I know there's some folks who've called for a food agency. I'm concerned about that because I actually think your way you framed the question hit the nail on the head. So many different agencies interact with food. And if we create one agency, I'm afraid, no pun intended around food, it's going to get too siloed. And the message isn't going to get to every commissioner or many commissioners that their job includes food, even if they don't think it does. So that's why I think we need to energize the food policy coordinator, broaden the advisory board there significantly. We also should develop, and I would want input from all of you, a set of goals and markers that we would put out there transparently and hold ourselves against. What is the level of hunger in New York City? Is it going up? Is it going down? What is the level of food stamp participation? How does that level of participation interact with how many folks who are eligible in the city of New York? Are we getting more folks who are eligible enrolled? Are we getting folks who are qualified for free meals enrolled in those programs? And how many public gardens do we have? How many urban gardening programs? We should figure out whatever they are, those 10 or 15 indicators, and then hold ourselves accountable.
Great, thank you. We have time for another question. And since you mentioned it, let's talk about hunger in New York City. The latest counts are that there are more than 1.5 million New Yorkers who are considered to be food insecure, 1 out of every 4 children, meaning that they lack a reliable source of food on a daily basis. Emergency food providers are going crazy trying to meet the need, and yet here we have Congress proposing cuts to food stamps, and it's really beyond belief. And as mayor, what would you do to end or reduce hunger in New York City, and what kinds of benchmarks would you use to measure the progress?
I'm not going to say a lot about Washington because I just want to talk about New York.
Let's stay out of Washington.
But I don't want that to in any way imply that I think what Washington has done is correct. But I do want to take a second to thank Senator Gillibrand for her leadership in Washington on this issue, which I think has been extraordinary. That said, if we waited around for Washington to solve hunger or any of our problems, we would be waiting a really long time. Right. So what we have to do, one, is figure out how to make sure everyone who qualifies for EBT is getting it. And we've taken some steps through my leadership. I'll expand on those as mayor. Medicare, Medicaid qualification and food stamps, very similar. We've never until the council asked, did we cross-reference lists of people who were getting other public benefits with lists of people who were getting food stamps? They're not exactly the same, but they're close. Why? We got the mayor's office to do that. We then did targeted outreach with many of you in this room into the zip codes where there was lots of people who qualified and didn't get them to get more enrollment up. We need to do more of that, strategically targeting folks who qualify. Then we need to make sure we're making food stamps EBT usable at every place we possibly can. When I first became speaker, The first year I was speaker, we sold $1,000, give or take, in food stamps at green markets. Now, because of my work, 51 of the 54 green markets in the city take food stamps, and last year, $821,000 worth of food stamps, EBT purchases happened at green markets. Now, about 50% of the green carts, which are a result of a law we all got passed in the council, and I think we all remember that was much harder than we thought it was going to be, because there are entrenched interests out there fighting against these kind of initiatives. It seems mind-boggling, but there are. About half of the green carts now, give or take, no, I'm sorry, not half, less than that, 50 of the ones that are out there take EBTs. We want to get all of them to have EBTs. The fresh rezoning that we passed in the council has helped create or save about a dozen supermarkets. We need to go further with that. We also need to explore some of the stuff they've done in Philadelphia and other places to see if there's a good way to use tax credits. The exact markers, I'll be honest, I don't know exactly what they would be, aside from that start with the number you put out, but I would ask for input from the community to develop those, put them out there, because it's just not acceptable to have that many people go to sleep tonight in the greatest city in the world, not knowing if they're going to have enough food to feed themselves or their families tomorrow. It's just not acceptable. And it's worse when, even with all the craziness in Washington, there's federal resources staying in Washington that should be in New Yorkers' pockets. And we also know when those EBT food stamps resources get in New Yorkers' pockets, they don't stay there. You can't bank them. They get used in communities that need the economic development. So we have to also seize that as well.
Thank you. We now go to the community question. A member of the community has a question. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Good evening. My name is Imani Jones. I live in South Side of Williamsburg. My question for the candidate is, in some New York City schools, all children get meals at no charge, regardless of family income, through the Universal School Meals Program. Programs like Universal School Meals increase participation in many schools and can reduce overall stigma around participation in the program. Yet since 2010, New York City Office of School Food has drastically reduced the number of schools participating in the program from 472 to 0 for the 2014 school year, despite pushback from community members who support expansion of universal school meals. Would you as mayor support a plan for citywide implementation of the Universal School Meals Program in New York City public schools?
So this is the question, right, about whether folks who are of a certain income level have to pay for meals, correct? I don't know. I would love to be able to say yes to that, but I'm not sure the federal guidelines allow us to do that anymore. And I say that because recently in the city's budget that we adopted, there were changes around the suggested donation level around meals. And as we understood it, we did not have the flexibility to eliminate the donation amount, as it's called, for the folks of higher income. And in fact, in some case, it's going to go up. So I think we need to look at what our flexibility is here, because I'm not quite sure we have the level of flexibility you would like in your question. So we might be bound a little bit by tighter federal restrictions than we'd realize, and we can follow up with our staffs on that.
Yeah, I think this was a staff question. Thank you very, very much. We'll get that one settled.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Christine Quinn.
Thank you very much.
It's really wonderful of you to come. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah. And our last but not least candidate is John Liu. Is he here? He's here. So please join me in giving a big welcome to candidate John Liu. He's currently New York's Comptroller, and he's a former city councilman. And he is slowly making his way. Here he is. Good. John Liu, everybody. How do you do? Welcome. Welcome. Please sit down. Thank you so much for coming. You're talking here to an audience of about 1,000 people who care deeply about food and our food system, making sure that people get enough food to eat, that food is produced in reasonable ways, and that New York has the best food system in the country. You've been told the ground rules. I asked you 3 questions. The timers are here. They'll keep time. You get a minute and a half for each one, and then there'll be a question from a member of the community. And my first question for you is about food access. The city has made an enormous amount of progress in increasing New Yorkers' access to healthy food through a variety of community programs such as Health Bucks, Shop Healthy, the Green Carts, and Fresh, and it's expanded farmers markets and their acceptance of EBT cards. And we've also seen a lot more community gardens and food co-ops. But access to fresh foods is still a problem for many New Yorkers. As mayor, how would you use the city's financial and other resources to increase access to healthy food in our communities, particularly low-income communities?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to see everybody out here. And food is a pretty important topic. And I apologize for walking slow because they didn't say I was going to come on right now. I just put a carrot in my mouth, and I was just trying to get it all out of my teeth. So that's why I had to take a couple of extra seconds. I was given no heads up that I was going to be told to come out. So in any event, this is one of the biggest issues. You know, there are still many people in the city who just don't have access. And I know that the city has done quite a bit. The Fresh program has worked to bring supermarkets to neighborhoods that didn't have them before. There are the green carts, I think to some extent have worked, although nowadays you don't see enough green in the green carts. There's lots of yellow, purple, red, and orange. But we do need to make sure that they carry more green as they were supposed to. But the question of how we can leverage our city's assets, you know, I don't even think it's that much about the money itself. It doesn't cost that much to recognize that. I think there's a statistic that 40% of the food served in New York City is wasted even before it gets to the table. And you have organizations like Food Bank, like City Harvest, like all the organizations listed here, okay? Who are very much capable of getting the food to and helping distribute the food, fresh food and healthy food to those who need it the most. I think city government can only do so much. I think that we need to rely on community-based organizations far more than we currently do. And let's get the paperwork out of their hands. Let's not subject them to all these requirements. Let the organizations do what they do the best, and that is to fulfill their mission of getting healthy food to all New Yorkers.
Great, thank you. The next question is about New York City's financial procurement system. The city serves about 270 million meals in schools, hospitals, jails, and so forth, and has massive purchasing power. Yet that purchasing power has never really been used to promote a local food economy and bring more jobs in or do anything like that. As mayor, how would you consider using purchases and contracts to promote a better food economy and more jobs and the growth of the regional food economy in general?
I would completely revamp the whole food procurement process we have right now. You know, I would, for whatever reason, I think the schools are a great way to promote healthy eating with regard to our kids from their earliest ages. And yet, for whatever reason, we do a terrible job of getting kids to eat the right things. And not because they don't want to eat the right things, but because the food that is served in schools often, it sucks. It really does. You know, my son is 12 years old, and for the last 7 years that he's been in his public school, he does not like the food. And it's healthy food, but he doesn't like it. You know, I remember when I was a kid eating hot lunch, you know, those string beans that you don't even have to chew. You just basically, you know, it dissolves in your mouth, you know, because they've been canned for the last 100 years. What we need is start in the schools, because that is actually the largest set of the food procurement we have in the city. Revamp those contracts, and I do believe in growing a food economy right here in New York City. Starting with some of the rooftop gardens. We also, obviously, I don't think we're going to be able to grow our entire food supply in rooftop gardens, but we can give it a try with a lot of the supply. Obviously, we also want to support some of the farms upstate. We have to continue to expand the farmers markets, which have worked very well. I've been to dozens of them all throughout the city just these past few weeks. And so I believe in promoting a food economy right here in New York City, and that starts with revamping the entire procurement process, starting with the schools. Let's get better food to our kids. They want to eat healthy. They know they need to eat healthy. Let's give them food that actually tastes decent.
Well, while we're on the subject of the food economy, the New York City food market is worth about $30 billion a year, but many of the workers in the industry don't get to share very much in that. 90% of them don't earn a living wage. 14% of workers in the food industry are on food stamps. Kind of amazing. As mayor, what would you do to improve the wages, benefits, and working conditions of food industry jobs?
Well, food industry jobs are they're often the majority of the cases minimum wage workers, and I do believe that the overall economy of New York City is one that is heading in the wrong direction, where we have a huge wealth gap that is worse than the rest of the country and growing faster than the rest of the country. At this point, the only destination for our trajectory is at some point there are going to be a few lords and barons and the rest of us being serfs and peasants. Obviously, we don't want to get back to the dark ages, and I think that we need to expand the middle class by first uplifting the working poor. Now, there are lots of people who say that minimum wage increase should be done, and in fact, it's making its way, $9 an hour. You know, honestly, $9 an hour sounds good, but there's no basis, no economic basis for $9 an hour in New York City. My office has been studying the issue, and I do believe that in New York City, based on our high cost of living, the minimum wage should be $11.50 an hour. $11.50 an hour, because it makes no sense whatsoever for government to mandate a minimum wage at which someone working full-time can't even get out of the poverty level. And so $11.50 is the correct economically based number for the city of New York, and when we allow that to happen, almost all the food industry workers will get a bump in their an increase in their purchasing power, which will then allow them to contribute back to the food economy because they'll be able to afford some of the things that are being sold at the farmers markets and make sure that they can provide for themselves and others. And it has a little bit of an upward lift or upward pressure on some prices in the short term, but it does serve very well to finally, once and for all, start to narrow the wealth gap that we see here in New York City, which I think is the #1 economic problem, not just for the food industry, but for the economy as a whole here in New York City. So let's really raise the minimum wage in a way that makes sense.
Right. Another question. Urban agriculture has an enormous potential to promote economic development in New York City, and a group at Columbia has identified nearly 5,000 acres of land within the city limits that could be used for urban farming. As mayor, what policies would you put into place in order to provide people with access to the information about this land and maybe being able to use it to set up a little urban farm here and there?
That's a great question. One thing I would do is I would bring about far greater transparency, because right now there are city properties that are for sale or quasi-city properties that could be available, but yet there's nowhere for people to get this kind of information. Unless you're a politically connected developer, you don't have access to this kind of information. I think that the city, whether it be through the EDC, which I've been very critical of, or through a normal city agency, should make this kind of information available to the general public. The Bloomberg administration is a big believer of market forces, and yet the absence of information that they continue to perpetuate actually runs counter to this market that he wants to create here in New York City. So I think market forces could be a big force in making all this land available and giving people the opportunities to, for example, start farms. But it first starts with information. In Flushing, we have had, for the longest time, what is essentially a farm. It's been a couple of acres off of Casino Corridor Park where some senior citizens have been growing vegetables, green vegetables, for almost 25 years now. And then they take it off and they harvest the vegetables, and they sell it on the sidewalks of Flushing, which for me as a council member prior had created other kinds of problems. But there was clearly a locally grown food economy based right there in Flushing. Well, if that could happen spontaneously, and it did happen spontaneously in Flushing, can you imagine what could happen if the city of New York actually provided information transparently and easily available to everybody in the city? I think, really, I mean, you would be amazed how many people will start growing their own vegetables.
Well, thank you very much. We have the community question. And please introduce yourself. This is a question from a member of the community.
Hi, my name is Sonia Longay. I live in Bed-Stuy, and my question for you is, where do you do most of your food shopping, and why?
Without showing preference to any store brands or anything like that, there is a grocery store called grocery supermarket called H Mart that is about three blocks away from where I live. So that's where I do most of my shopping. But when I was on the SNAP challenge, and I want to thank Food Bank for daring me to do it a few weeks ago, I had to scour the internet for the supermarkets that had the best sales that week. And I found the C-Town that had incredible bargains. I mean, they had 2-for-1 sales on pasta, on sauce, like, cans of Campbell pork and beans were 50 cents each. And so I loaded up at that C-Town. And I'm inclined to go back to that C-Town. It was in the middle of Brooklyn.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking John Liu.
That's it?
That's it. That's it. Thank you very much.
I heard there was a no-show. I can take the time of the person who didn't show up. I don't want to leave. All right.
I'm not even running for office.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Well, wasn't that fun? That was fun. I just want to take a couple of minutes to do a few rounding up things and just to reemphasize that the food movement here is strong enough to have gotten 6 candidates to actually show up, take it seriously, and answer questions. Congratulations to all of you. Don't lose the momentum. This is just the beginning, and you really need to run with it. So thanks to you. And then thanks especially to the funders, the North Star Fund, City Harvest, Public Health Solutions, and the Food Policy Center at Hunter College, the New School for letting us use the auditorium, and really special thanks to the Brooklyn Food Coalition for organizing the community and youth forum questions. That was really, I just thought, really made this special. And then an enormous hand goes to the co-hosts for putting this program together, and especially to Caitlin Salemi, who really did it. Caitlin, are you here? Caitlin, please come out. Please. Would you like to say something?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for coming. Have a great evening.